What if I told you that the person serving your coffee might actually own the building you're sitting in? This is the true story of a man who thought his wealth made him untouchable and a woman who proved that respect has nothing to do with what you wear to work. A billionaire who humiliated the wrong person. A waitress who was hiding the biggest secret of her life. And one impossible moment that flipped everything upside down in a way no one saw coming. Stay with me because by the end of the story, you'll never treat service workers the same way again. You'll understand why the people we overlook might be the very ones holding all the power. And you might just realize that someone you dismissed today could be signing your paycheck tomorrow. This is a story about hidden fortunes, public humiliation, and the sweetest kind of justice that money can't buy. Let me take you to the heart of Chicago, to a morning that changed 2 lives forever. Welcome to Tales of Africa. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on this story and where you are watching from. You know, sometimes the universe has a way of teaching us lessons we desperately need to learn. Let me tell you about Marcus Chun, a man who thought he had the world figured out. Marcus was a self-made billionaire, the kind of success story you read about in magazines. He built sterling enterprises from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. 38 years old, sharp suits, expensive watches, the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. But here's the thing about Marcus that people who worked for him knew too well. Success had made him cruel. Not the obvious cruelty of yelling and throwing things, but the cold, casual cruelty of someone who believed that wealth made him superior to everyone else. He measured people by their bank accounts and judged their worth by their job titles. If you weren't at his level, you simply didn't matter. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus walked into Rosie's Diner, a small breakfast place in downtown Chicago that he'd never noticed before. His usual spot was closed for renovation, and his assistant had recommended this place. Marcus hated it immediately. The booths were old, the floor tiles were chipped, and the whole place smelled like bacon grease and coffee that had been sitting too long. This is what I've been reduced to, he thought, checking his expensive watch with visible disgust. He sat in a corner booth, already irritated, already looking for reasons to leave a terrible review online. That's when she appeared. Her name was Grace Adeyemi, 29 years old, wearing a simple blue waitress uniform that had been washed so many times the color was fading. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her smile was warm despite the exhaustion you could see in her eyes. She'd been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight, mornings at the diner, evenings at a cleaning service, barely sleeping, barely surviving. "Good morning, sir," Grace said, her voice kind and professional. "What can I get for you today?" Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. "Coffee, black, and make it fast. I don't have all day." "Of course," Grace replied, still smiling, even though something in his tone made her stomach tighten. She'd dealt with rude customers before. In this job, you learn to let it roll off your back like water off a raincoat. She brought him his coffee within 2 minutes, setting it down carefully with a small pitcher of cream on the side, just in case he changed his mind. "I said black," Marcus snapped, pushing the cream pitcher away so hard it nearly fell off the table. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" The words hit Grace like a slap. Other customers turned to look. She felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "I apologize, sir. I just thought you might want the option." Marcus finally looked up at her, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Let me guess. High school dropout? Probably never went to college. That's why you're stuck here serving coffee to people who actually made something of themselves." The diner went quiet. Even the cook in the back stopped moving. Grace's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the cream pitcher, but she met his eyes with dignity that surprised even herself. "I have a master's degree in business administration, sir," she said quietly, "and I'm very good at what I do." Marcus laughed, a cruel sound that carried across the diner. "A master's degree and you're a waitress. That's hilarious. Let me give you some free business advice, sweetheart. If you were smart enough to use that degree, you wouldn't be wearing that ugly uniform and serving people like me. You'd be someone who matters." Grace stood there, humiliation burning in her chest, but something else burned there too. Something stronger. Pride. Dignity. The knowledge that this man knew absolutely nothing about her life, her struggles, or who she really was. "I'll get your order, sir," she said, her voice steady as stone. "And I hope you enjoy your breakfast." As she walked away, she heard him talking loudly to someone on his phone, making sure everyone could hear. "Yeah, I'm stuck in this dump with waitresses who think a degree makes them important. Can you imagine? Probably got her degree online from some fake school. These people have no idea what real success looks like." Grace took his order. Eggs, toast, bacon. She delivered it without a word, her face a mask of professional calm. But inside, her heart was pounding. Because Grace Adeyemi was hiding a secret that was about to change everything. 3 months ago, Grace's uncle, Jonathan Adeyemi, had passed away. Uncle Jonathan wasn't just any relative. He was the founder and CEO of Adeyemi Holdings, one of the largest investment firms in the Midwest. A quiet, brilliant man who had built an empire through smart investments and ethical business practices. But he had no children, no wife, no direct heirs. Grace had been his favorite niece, the only one who visited him in the hospital during his final days, the only one who sat with him, held his hand, and listened to his stories about building his company from nothing. Uncle Jonathan had watched Grace work 3 jobs to pay off her mother's medical debts. He'd seen her sacrifice her own dreams to take care of her family. He'd seen the strength in her that others missed. 2 weeks ago, his lawyer had called Grace with news that made her drop the phone. Uncle Jonathan had left her everything. Adeyemi Holdings, worth $3.2 billion, was now hers. Every asset, every property, every investment. She was, overnight, one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. But there was a condition in the will, one that Uncle Jonathan had insisted on. Grace had to work as an ordinary employee for 1 month before taking control of the company. He wanted her to remember what it felt like to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to be treated as if you didn't matter. Because he believed that only people who remembered that feeling could lead with compassion. So Grace kept working at the diner, kept wearing that faded uniform, kept serving coffee to people who looked right through her. And in 2 more days, she would walk into Adeyemi Holdings as its new CEO. What she didn't know was that Adeyemi Holdings owned 40% of Sterling Enterprises. Marcus Chen's company, the empire he was so proud of, was partially owned by the very firm Grace was about to control. The man who just humiliated her was, technically, working for her. He just didn't know it yet. Marcus finished his breakfast, left a $1 tip on a $30 bill, and walked out without another word. Grace picked up the single-dollar bill and tucked it into her apron. She would remember this, every detail, not for revenge but as a reminder. That afternoon, Marcus returned to his office on the 45th floor of Sterling Tower. He had a meeting scheduled with representatives from Adeyemi Holdings. They'd been requesting a meeting for weeks, something about wanting to discuss the future direction of their investment in Sterling Enterprises. Marcus wasn't worried. He knew how to handle investors. Smile, make promises, show them some impressive numbers, and they'd stay quiet for another quarter. His assistant knocked on his door. "Mr. Chun, the representatives from Adeyemi Holdings are here." "Show them in," Marcus said, not even looking up from his laptop. The door opened and 2 people walked in. One was a lawyer in an expensive suit. The other was Grace Adeyemi, still wearing her waitress uniform because she'd come straight from her shift at the diner. Marcus looked up and froze. "You," he said, his voice filled with confusion and anger. "What are you doing here? Did you follow me? Are you stalking me? Call security." Grace sat down in the chair across from his desk, her posture calm and professional. "No need for security, Mr. Chun. I'm here for our scheduled meeting." Marcus looked at the lawyer. "Is this some kind of joke?" The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Mr. Chun, allow me to introduce Grace Adeyemi, the new CEO of Adeyemi Holdings. As you know, Adeyemi Holdings owns 40% of Sterling Enterprises. We're here to discuss some changes." The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked from the lawyer to Grace, his mind racing, unable to process what he was hearing. "You're not a waitress," he said stupidly. Grace smiled, but it wasn't cruel. It was sad. I am a waitress, Mr. Chun. I'm also a master's degree graduate, a woman who worked 3 jobs to pay her mother's medical bills, and as of 2 weeks ago, the CEO of the company that has significant control over your business. You were right about one thing this morning. I do matter. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy judging me by my uniform. Marcus tried to speak, but no words came out. The lawyer continued. Adeyemi Holdings has decided to exercise its rights as a major shareholder. Effective immediately, we're requesting a full audit of Sterling Enterprises practices, particularly regarding employee treatment and corporate culture. Grace leaned forward slightly. You see, Mr. Chun, my uncle built Adeyemi Holdings on one principle. Treat people with dignity regardless of their position. He believed that a company's character is defined by how it treats the people it considers beneath it. I intend to honor that principle. She pulled out a folder and slid it across his desk. These are complaints filed by Sterling Enterprises employees over the past 2 years. Hostile work environment, wage theft, discrimination, harassment. Your company has been sued 6 times, and each time you settled quietly to avoid bad publicity. Marcus, that billion-dollar smile you wear to investor meetings is built on the backs of people you've crushed. Marcus found his voice, but it was weak. This is personal. You're doing this because I was rude to you at a diner. Grace shook her head. This has nothing to do with what happened this morning. Well, not entirely. What happened this morning just confirmed what these documents already told me. You believe some people matter and some don't. That's not the kind of business Adeyemi Holdings wants to be associated with. She stood up, and Marcus noticed for the first time how much presence she had. How strong she looked despite that faded uniform. We're not pulling our investment, she said. Not yet. But things are going to change, Mr. Chin. Sterling Enterprises will implement new employee protection policies, fair wage standards, and anti-discrimination training. And I'll be checking in personally to make sure it happens. If you resist, well, 40% is enough to make your life very difficult. The lawyer handed Marcus a thick binder. These are the proposed changes. You have 48 hours to review them. We'll meet again on Thursday. As they walked toward the door, Grace paused and turned back. Oh, and Mr. Chun, about that business advice you gave me this morning. You said if I was smart enough to use my degree, I wouldn't be serving people like you. I'd be someone who matters. She smiled. Turns out I can do both. I can serve coffee with dignity, and I can sit across from you as the person who decides your company's future. Maybe that's what real success looks like. She left Marcus sitting in his office, surrounded by glass walls and city views, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus learned what it meant to have Grace Adeyemi watching his company. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't petty. She was thorough. She requested files, reviewed complaints, interviewed employees. And what she found was worse than she expected. She discovered that Marcus had fired a single mother for missing work when her child was hospitalized. She found evidence that he'd withheld bonuses from employees to inflate quarterly profits. She learned that he'd laughed at an assistant who asked for time off to attend his father's funeral. The pattern was clear. Marcus didn't just disrespect service workers. He disrespected anyone he considered beneath him, which was almost everyone. The audit report landed on his desk like a bomb. Sterling Enterprises was given an ultimatum. Implement immediate changes or face a very public shareholder revolt. The media would love the story of a waitress turned CEO taking down an arrogant billionaire. Marcus knew he had no choice. He called a company-wide meeting, something he'd never done before. Hundreds of employees gathered in the main conference room, confused and worried. Marcus stood at the podium, his confidence shattered, his usual swagger gone. I've made mistakes, he began, and you could hear the struggle in his voice. I've built this company by being tough, by demanding excellence. But I've crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed. I've treated people in ways that were unacceptable. And it took someone with more courage than me to show me that. He looked directly at Grace, who was standing in the back of the room, still wearing her waitress uniform because she'd come from her morning shift. Many of you don't know this, but the woman standing in the back of this room is Grace Adeyemi. She's the new CEO of Adeyemi Holdings, which owns a significant part of Sterling Enterprises. She's also the woman I humiliated in a diner 2 weeks ago because I thought her uniform meant she didn't matter. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The room was completely silent. Effective immediately, Marcus continued, Sterling Enterprises is implementing new policies. Fair wages, better benefits, zero tolerance for discrimination or harassment. And I'm donating my next 2 bonuses to employee assistance programs. After the meeting, Marcus approached Grace. He looked tired, humbled in a way she'd never seen in someone so wealthy. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said quietly. What I said to you that morning was unforgivable. Grace studied him for a long moment. Forgiveness isn't something you earn by making a speech, Mr. Chun. It's something you earn by changing how you live. Show me through actions, not words. Over the following months, something remarkable happened. Marcus actually changed. Not overnight, not completely, but genuinely. He started learning the names of people who worked for him. He attended employee events. He listened to complaints with actual attention. He was learning, slowly and painfully, what his wealth had made him forget. That respect isn't about money or power. It's about seeing people as people. 6 months after that morning at the diner, Grace officially stepped into her role as CEO of Adeyemi Holdings. She wore a beautiful suit, stood in an office with a view that stretched across the entire city, and felt the weight of $3.2 billion in assets resting on her shoulders. But every Friday morning, she still put on that faded blue waitress uniform and worked a shift at Rosie's diner. People thought she was crazy. You're a billionaire CEO, her assistant would say. Why do you still serve coffee? Grace would smile and say, because the moment I forget what it felt like to be dismissed, to be overlooked, to be treated like I don't matter, that's the moment I become someone like Marcus used to be. The diner kept her grounded. The work kept her humble. And every customer she served, she treated with the dignity she'd fought so hard to maintain on that terrible morning when a billionaire tried to break her spirit. Marcus never forgot that lesson either. Sometimes he would come into Rosie's diner, sit in that same corner booth, and order coffee from Grace. She always remembered how he liked it. Black, no cream. And he always left a generous tip, not to impress her, but because he finally understood. Understood that the person serving your coffee has dreams, struggles, and a dignity that your wealth can never diminish. One morning, almost a year after their first meeting, Marcus sat at that booth and said, you could have destroyed me. You had all the power. Why didn't you? Grace set down his coffee and sat across from him. Because destruction is easy, Mr. Chun. Change is hard. I didn't want to destroy you. I wanted to prove that even someone like you could learn to be better. And you did. Marcus smiled, a real smile this time. Not the cold, superior smile he used to wear, but something genuine. Thank you, he said simply, for not giving up on me when I didn't deserve another chance. Grace stood up to return to work. We all deserve another chance, Mr. Chun. The question is what we do with it. As she walked away, Marcus watched her greet other customers, saw how she treated everyone with the same warmth and respect, and he realized something profound. Grace Adeyemi wasn't powerful because she inherited billions. She was powerful because she never let money or humiliation change who she was at her core. The story of the billionaire and the waitress became legendary in Chicago business circles. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Because it reminded people in expensive suits and corner offices that character isn't measured by your bank account. It's measured by how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from being kind. Grace built Adeyemi Holdings into an even more successful company, but she never lost touch with where she came from. She created programs for service workers, funded scholarships for people working multiple jobs, and always treated everyone she met with dignity. Marcus rebuilt Sterling Enterprises on a foundation of respect. He never became perfect, nobody does, but he became better. And sometimes that's enough. If this story touched your heart, I want you to remember something important. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The waitress serving your coffee might be a CEO hiding her identity. Or she might be a single mother working 3 jobs. Or she might be someone saving every penny to pay for a parent's medical care. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you treat her like she matters because she does. Respect isn't something we give to people based on their job titles or bank accounts. It's something we give because we recognize the shared humanity in all of us. Grace Adeyemi proved that wealth without character is worthless. Marcus Chun proved that even the coldest heart can learn to feel again. And together, they proved that the people we dismiss today might be the very ones who change our lives tomorrow. So the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their uniform or their position, remember grace. Remember that the person serving you might own more than you ever will. But more importantly, remember that even if they don't, they still deserve your respect. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to survive in a world that too often judges us by what we have instead of who we are. That's the real lesson of this story. Not about hidden billionaires or corporate takeovers. About choosing kindness when cruelty is easier. About giving respect when you have nothing to gain. About seeing people when the world has made them invisible. Grace Adeyemi is still serving coffee at Rosie's Diner every Friday morning. And every customer she serves, she treats like they're the most important person in the world. Because to her, they are. That's not just good business. That's being human. And that, my friends, is worth more than all the billions in the world.